Hello and welcome to lecture number 70. This is topic 4.17, the evolution of African American music from spirituals to hip hop. There's a few learning objectives today, and the first one is to describe ways African American music blends musical and performative traditions from Africa. So we'll start by discussing African-based musical and performative elements. These elements were present as early as the arrival of enslaved people in the Americas and were incorporated into the new music genres that later developed in what became the United States. These musical traditions trace back to West African cultures where drumming, communal singing, and dance played crucial roles in social and spiritual life. They form the foundation for the sounds, expressions, and interpretations in African American music today. One of the key elements is improvisation, which is the spontaneous creation of music, allowing performers to adapt and express emotions in the moment. We see this in jazz, performed by musicians like Louis Armstrong and John Coltrane. Armstrong, often called the father of jazz, revolutionized the genre with his virtuosic trumpet solos, while Coltrane pushed improvisation to new heights in modal jazz during the 1960s. Another essential feature is called call and response, a musical dialogue between a leader and a group, reinforcing communal participation in a song. This tradition can be seen in spirituals like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Call and response is also widely used in African work songs and field hollers, which helped enslaved people coordinate labor and maintain morale under harsh conditions. Syncopation is another defining characteristic. This rhythmic complexity places emphasis on unexpected beats, often off beats in a 4/4 time signature, creating a dynamic and engaging sound. This technique first appeared in styles like ragtime, famously utilized by Scott Joplin, but was later adapted to funk by James Brown. Joplin, known as the king of ragtime, helped bring syncopation into mainstream music with pieces like The Entertainer, which remains widely recognized today. Storytelling through music is also a significant tradition, using songs to pass down history, struggles, and cultural pride. This was common in African traditions where griots, or oral historians and musicians, preserved history through song. In the United States, we see this tradition in blues music performed by artists like Bessie Smith and Muddy Waters. The blues emerged in the Deep South in the late 19th century, deeply connected to the experiences of formerly enslaved people, and influenced later genres like rock and roll. Another key element is the fusion of music with dance, blending rhythm and movement as an essential form of expression. This was evident in early jazz dance and tap, but also evolved into later styles like breakdancing and hip-hop. African American dance traditions have historically shaped popular culture, from the Charleston of the 1920s to the rise of hip-hop dance in the Bronx during the 1970s. These African-based musical and performative elements remain central to American music and culture, shaping genres that continue to evolve today. Without these influences, modern music from rock and R&B to pop and EDM would not exist in their current form. The second learning objective is describe the influence of African American musical tradition on American and global music genres. African American music tradition includes many more genres than those listed on this slide, but there are some of the main ones you should be familiar with. Spirituals were rooted in the religious expression of enslaved Africans. These songs were not only a form of worship, but also a means of communication, resistance, and hope. Many spirituals contained hidden messages and codes used on the Underground Railroad to help enslaved people escape for freedom. Songs like Wade in the Water and Follow the Drinking Gourd are examples of this. The blues emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, characterized by its 12-bar structure and emotional storytelling. This genre was developed by W.C. Handy, often called the father of the blues, and then later popularized by performers like Ma Rainey and Chuck Berry. Ma Rainey, known as the mother of the blues, helped shape the genre's vocal style, while Chuck Berry brought blues influences into early rock and roll. Jazz was developed by musicians like Jelly Roll Morton and Buddy Bolden, primarily out of New Orleans. It emerged from a blend of syncopation, brass instruments, ragtime, work songs, and spirituals. New Orleans, with its rich cultural mix of African, Caribbean, and European traditions, became the birthplace of jazz in the early 20th century. Morton claimed to have invented jazz, though in reality it evolved from many influences, and it would be more accurate to call him the first jazz composer. Gospel evolved from spirituals and later influenced the development of soul music, with legendary singers like Aretha Franklin leading the way. Gospel music was a cornerstone of the civil rights movement, with songs like We Shall Overcome becoming anthems for social justice. Rhythm and blues, or R&B, was another variation of the blues performed by artists like Ray Charles, James Brown, Etta James, and Fats Domino. This genre played a large role in the development of rock and roll. Ray Charles fused gospel and blues to create the foundation for soul music, while James Brown's energetic performances helped shape funk. Hip-hop is another key genre within the African American musical tradition. We're going to discuss this more in depth in future slides, but for now, just know that hip-hop emerged in the 1970s in the Bronx, blending DJing, rapping, breakdancing, and graffiti art. All of these genres not only influenced American music, but also revolutionized international music styles. For example, rock and roll, which was shaped by R&B and electric blues, influenced early rock artists like Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Latin jazz is another genre that emerged from these influences, blending jazz with African rhythms from Latin America. This can be seen in the collaborations between Dizzy Gillespie and Cuban percussionist Chano Pozo. Gillespie and Pozo's partnership in the 1940s helped create Afro-Cuban jazz, which introduced rhythms like the clave into mainstream jazz. The foundation of rock and roll lies in modified gospel and blues, incorporating new rhythms and electric instruments. The following are some African American performers that helped shape the genre. First is Sister Rosetta Tharpe, known as the godmother of rock and roll. She combined gospel vocals with electric guitar, and she paved the way for the genre's development. This influence is especially evident in her 1944 hit song Strange Things Happening Every Day. Tharpe was one of the first musicians to use distortion on the electric guitar, a technique later embraced by rock guitarists like Chuck Berry and Jimi Hendrix. Tharpe was also unique in that she was semi-open about her queer identity when she toured around the country. Bo Diddley, famous for the Bo Diddley beat, introduced syncopation and innovated guitar effects. It was a clave-based rhythm, and it became a fundamental pattern in rock and roll and is later heard in songs by performers like Buddy Holly and the Rolling Stones. Little Richard brought an energetic and flamboyant showmanship to his performances, shaping the energy of rock and roll performances. His 1955 hit, Tutti Frutti, with its driving piano riffs, had a major influence on bands like the Beatles and later artists such as Prince. Little Richard's uninhibited stage presence inspired generations of performers, including Mick Jagger, David Bowie, and Elton John. Despite their contributions, early rock and roll was often marketed to white audiences, with some black artists not receiving the recognition they deserved at the time. However, their impact remains undeniable in shaping modern music. African American music reflects the lived experiences of joy, hope, and creativity in various ways across different genres. Spirituals powerfully express the hope and resilience of enslaved people as they sought freedom from their condition. The blues capture both personal and collective struggles, serving as an outlet for emotional expression. Blues music often addressed themes of heartbreak, labor hardships, and racial injustice, evolving into anthems for marginalized communities. Jazz showcased creativity and innovation, even amidst segregation and discrimination. Music has also been used as a form of social critique in response to ongoing racism and oppression. Here we'll start talking about how hip-hop developed and was used in this way. Hip-hop emerged in the late 20th century, and it became a powerful tool for addressing African American experiences with poverty and systemic inequality in urban areas. The third learning objective is describe the origins and elements that define hip-hop culture. Hip-hop is much more than just the music you may be familiar with. It's an entire cultural movement that encompasses multiple artistic and expressive elements. Its roots trace back to the Bronx, New York, in the 1970s, where young Black and Latino community members helped develop it. Hip-hop emerged during a time of economic decline, urban decay, and social unrest, providing an outlet for creative expression and resistance. The culture was born out of collaboration, artistic innovation, and community engagement. There are four main elements of hip-hop culture. DJing was pioneered by DJ Kool Herc, who developed breakbeats, or looped drum sections of songs, to create danceable rhythms. He's credited with hosting the first ever hip-hop party in 1973, where he used two turntables to extend the instrumental breaks of funk records, giving birth to the concept of the breakbeat. MCing, or rapping, involves verbal storytelling and rhythmic poetry. Early pioneers of this art form included Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. One of their most famous songs, The Message, was one of the first hip-hop tracks to address social issues like poverty and systemic oppression. Breakdancing, or b-boying and b-girling, is a dynamic dance style that incorporates acrobatic moves, creativity, and athleticism. Breakdancing emerged from New York City street battles where dancers competed to showcase their skills, later evolving into an international competitive dance form. And finally, graffiti art, a visual expression of identity, rebellion, and urban storytelling. Early graffiti artists included Fab Five Freddy and Jean-Michel Basquiat. Graffiti first gained widespread attention in the 1970s as artists used subway trains and city walls as their canvases, turning New York into an open-air art gallery. Hip-hop culture later became a global phenomenon, in parts due to the popularity of hip-hop music. By the 1980s and 1990s, hip-hop was exported as part of American consumer culture, spreading to regions with no direct African-American presence, such as parts of East Asia. However, it also resonated deeply in regions with similar struggles, including urban poverty, police brutality, and systemic discrimination. This is why hip-hop culture found a strong foothold in communities with large African diaspora populations, such as the favelas of Brazil and marginalized neighborhoods in France, where racial discrimination remains a major issue. French hip-hop artists like MC Solar and groups like I Am used rap to address social injustice, much like their American counterparts. Hip-hop music is the most enduring component of hip-hop culture. African American artists like James Brown played a crucial role in influencing early DJs, helping to shape hip-hop sound. Brown's rhythmic, funk-driven drum patterns became some of the most sampled beats in hip-hop history, laying the foundation for breakbeats. Many early hip-hop DJs sampled and looped drum breaks from James Brown's songs. For example, the drum break from his 1970 song Funky Drummer was widely sampled in hip-hop classics such as LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, Public Enemy's Bring the Noise and Fight the Power, Run DMC's Run House, and NWA's F the Police. DJs also experimented with new turntable techniques, transforming the way music was played and performed. DJ Kool Herc pioneered the technique of extending the breakbeat, creating longer instrumental sections for dancers. We'll explain this further in a future slide. Grandmaster Flash helped develop mixing and scratching, turning the turntable into a percussive instrument, allowing DJs to add complex rhythms and textures to a song. His innovations, such as the quick mix theory, allowed DJs to seamlessly loop beats, influencing the sound of early hip-hop. MCs, or rappers, started adding rhymes over these beats at hip-hop parties, marking the origins of rap music. The first commercially successful rap song was Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang in 1979. This track introduced hip-hop to a mainstream audience and proved that rap music could be commercially viable. Over time, hip-hop evolved into different regional and stylistic variations, including New York hip-hop, the birthplace of hip-hop, home to early pioneers like Run DMC, Public Enemy, and later artists like Nas and the Notorious B.I.G. In Philadelphia, they were known for its emphasis on battle rap and DJ culture, with artists like The Roots and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the French Prince. And with the West Coast, there was popular artists like Ice-T, N.W.A., later Tupac Shakur, were often addressing themes of police brutality and urban struggles. There's also gangster rap, which emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and this style emphasized raw depictions of street life. Hip-hop music has faced criticisms for its glorification of violence, materialism, and casual misogyny, particularly in gangster rap. Albums like NWA Straight Outta Compton were banned from some radio stations due to their controversial lyrics, but they also sparked important conversations about systemic racism and police brutality. Despite the early pushback, hip-hop gained wider acceptance among young and predominantly white audiences in the 1990s and 2000s, helping it evolve into the dominant global music genre it is today. Artists like Eminem and the Beastie Boys helped bridge the gap between hip-hop and mainstream white audiences, demonstrating the genre's broad appeal. Breakdancing, another core element of hip-hop culture, emerged as a direct result of DJs like Kool Herc extending the break sections of songs. This technique, known as the merry-go-round, involved the DJ playing the same record on two different turntables and extending the drum or instrumental section, allowing dancers more time to showcase their moves and routines. This innovation transformed the dance floor, giving rise to breakdancing as a competitive and expressive art form. Breakdancing is performed independently by b-boys and b-girls who use acrobatic moves, footwork, and freezes to showcase their skill and creativity. Dancers often battle one another, taking turns displaying their best moves in a competitive setting. Crew battles or team-based competitions became popular, allowing groups of dancers to face off against each other. As breakdancing gained international recognition, it became one of the first elements of hip-hop culture to spread worldwide. By the 1980s, breakdancers were featured in mainstream films like Beat Street in 1984 and Breakin' also in 1984, bringing the dance form into popular culture. This increasing popularity of breakdancing has led to its inclusion in the 2024 Olympics as an official Olympic sport, marking a historic moment for hip-hop culture. This recognition highlights breakdancing's evolution from a grassroots street dance to a respected global competitive discipline. Graffiti is the oldest element of hip-hop culture, predating both the music and dance aspects. It originated in New York City in the 1960s and 70s when artists began tagging walls and other public spaces. As hip-hop emerged, graffiti became a vital form of artistic expression for urban youth, providing a visual voice for the culture. Graffiti artists, also called writers, emblazoned walls, bridges, and subway cars with elaborate designs, messages, and tags, or stylized signatures. Tagging was a way for artists to mark their presence in the city, often competing to gain the most visibility. The art form ranged from simple, quickly written tags to elaborate, colorful murals incorporating intricate lettering, 3D effects, and cultural symbolism. Graffiti became both an underground movement and a form of public protest, challenging social norms and reclaiming urban spaces. Authorities often viewed graffiti as vandalism, leading to crackdowns and arrests, but many artists saw it as a legitimate form of self-expression. Graffiti eventually gained mainstream recognition, with some artists moving into the fine art world and exhibiting their work in galleries and museums. Jean-Michel Basquiat started as a graffiti artist under the name of Samo before transitioning into the fine art world. His work blended social commentary, poetry, and African American cultural influences, making him one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. His work is now heavily sought after, and the untitled piece on the slide actually sold at auction for over $100 million. Hip-hop did not emerge in a vacuum. It was born out of the struggles, pride, and artistic expressions that defined the Black freedom movement and the Black arts movement of the 1960s and 1970s. As these movements emphasized racial pride, self-determination, and cultural identity, hip-hop inherited the revolutionary spirit and transformed it into a powerful new art form. From its earliest days, hip-hop was about more than music. It was a vehicle for political and social activism. One of the movement's pioneers, Afrika Bambaataa, recognized the power of hip-hop to inspire change. In response to the gang violence plaguing the Bronx, he founded the Zulu Nation, an organization dedicated to promoting peace, unity, and knowledge through hip-hop. Instead of engaging in destructive conflicts, young people began using rap battles, breakdancing, and graffiti as forms of artistic competition and expression. The influence of Black nationalism and the Black Panther Party was evident in early hip-hop culture. Artists and fans embraced Afrocentric fashion and symbolism as a way to celebrate their heritage and resist cultural assimilation. The clothing choices of many hip-hop artists reflected this pride in political consciousness. The shikis symbolized a connection to African tradition and history. Medallions featuring the African continent of the red, black, and green colors of Pan-Africanism represented Black unity and empowerment. Natural hairstyles such as afros, dreadlocks, and braids rejected Eurocentric beauty standards and reinforced the idea that Blackness itself was a form of resistance. Hip-hop quickly became a platform for addressing racial injustice and systemic oppression, echoing the militant energy of the 1960s. Public Enemy's 1989 anthem, Fight the Power, drew direct inspiration from the civil rights and Black Power movements, urging listeners to challenge racism and demand change. Chuck D, the group's frontman, famously described hip-hop as the Black CNN, emphasizing its role in delivering unfiltered news about the realities of Black life in America. But hip-hop was not just a continuation of political activism, it was also a continuation of Black artistic traditions. The genre preserved and reinterpreted older Black musical and literary forms, particularly jazz and poetry. Jazz's influence on hip-hop was profound, as many artists sampled classic jazz records to create new sounds. Groups like A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul used jazz loops and instrumentation blending past and present Black musical innovations. This sampling helped define the golden age of hip-hop in the late 1980s and early 1990s, keeping jazz's legacy alive in a modern form. Poetry also shaped hip-hop's lyricism, with spoken word traditions influencing rap's rhythmic flow and storytelling. One of the most direct precursors to hip-hop was Gil Scott-Heron's 1971 spoken word piece, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, which criticized media manipulation and systemic oppression. His politically charged delivery laid the groundwork for socially conscious rap, inspiring artists to use the lyrics as a tool for change. Today, hip-hop continues to be a cultural and political force, standing on the foundations built by the Black freedom movements. From jazz samples to protest anthems, from Afrocentric fashion to poetic storytelling, hip-hop remains deeply connected to the legacy of Black activism, ensuring that the fight for justice and empowerment lives on. As the Black Power movement of the 1960s and 1970s declined, its spirit did not disappear. It evolved. The fight for racial justice, self-determination, and empowerment found a new home in hip-hop. Hip-hop became more than music. It was a political platform, a voice for the voiceless, and a continuation of the resistance that Black Power leaders had championed decades earlier. Many of the issues that had fueled the Black Power era, police brutality, economic disparity, and systemic racism, remained pressing concerns for Black America. In the absence of organized political movements on the scale of the Black Panthers, hip-hop artists used their music to vocalize ongoing struggles and bring attention to injustices that mainstream society often ignored. From its earliest days, hip-hop spoke truth to power with NWA's F the Police, capturing the raw anger of Black communities facing racial profiling and police violence, echoing the Panthers' stance against state oppression. Decades later, as these same issues persisted, hip-hop remained a rallying cry for justice. Kendrick Lamar's All Right in 2015 became an anthem for Black Lives Matter movement, chanted at protests across the country. Similarly, Janelle Monáe's How You Talkin' About served as a haunting tribute to Black lives lost to police violence, demanding that their names not be forgotten. But hip-hop's influence extended beyond racial justice. It also became a battleground for gender equality and empowerment. In a genre often criticized for its misogyny, Queen Latifah's Unity stood as a bold statement against sexism and gender violence, calling for respect and dignity for women in hip-hop and beyond. Her success paved the way for future female artists to use rap as a tool for social commentary and empowerment. As hip-hop grew, it transformed into a global force for activism and cultural expression. It was no longer just a voice for the streets, it became an art form recognized on the world stage. In 2018, Kendrick Lamar's Damn became the first hip-hop album to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music, marking a historic moment that legitimized rap as a form of high artistic and cultural significance. The prize committee described the album as a virtuosic song collection unified by its vernacular authenticity and rhythmic dynamism that offers affecting vignettes capturing the complexity of modern African American life. Despite its commercialization and evolving sound, hip-hop has remained true to its roots as a continuation of Black Power. From Public Enemy to Kendrick Lamar, from protest songs to political anthems, hip-hop continues to challenge oppression, amplify marginalized voices, and demand justice. It stands as proof that the spirit of resistance, first championed by Black Power leaders, still thrives, echoing through beats, rhymes, and the global movement it has become. And finally, for the recap. African American music is founded on elements of improvisation, call and response, syncopation, and storytelling. Genres included spirituals, gospel, jazz, R&B, blues, and hip-hop, and they influenced other genres like rock and roll. Hip-hop culture is composed of DJing, MCing, breakdancing, and graffiti. And finally, hip-hop music has continued to be used as a way to articulate African American experiences and their ongoing struggles. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, click the thumbnail on the screen. And if you would like more resources to help you study, you can visit apushlights.com/AFAM. I wish you the best of luck with your studies, and I hope to see you back on the next lecture.